The Ford Barra, the double overhead cam, 4-litre straight 6-cylinder engine found in our Falcons and Territories for over a decade. It's one of the most revered engines worldwide. Known for its ability to handle over 500 horsepower in standard form, this could easily be the greatest engine ever made. Or is it? Is it actually one of the most overrated engines known to man? Well, today in this video, we're going to talk about it. So just quickly before we get started, if you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing, give the thumbs up and make a comment below on what your thoughts about this engine are. Also, if you're looking for Barra merch, you're a real Barra tragic. As you can see, I'm wearing the full boost Send It top from their shop, so link is in the description over there. They've got heaps of Barra merch, different t-shirts, stickers and all that kind of stuff for all you Barra tragics, so get onto it. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. The Barra, short for barramundi, as in the fish, was the code name for two series of engines coming up in the new next generation BA Ford Falcon here in Australia. It was the double overhead cam 4-litre engine that we all know, but it was also the code name given to the 5.4-litre V8. We won't be discussing the V8 today at all in this video. We're just going to focus on the Barra that we all know as in the straight 6 4-litre. Now, the Barra wasn't really an overnight success or something dreamed up in Ford Falcon Australia's head office and said, hey, we should make this engine. It has a long history dating right back to the 60s, where you can find big straight 6-cylinder cubic engines under the bonnet or the hood for you seppos of our Ford Falcons here. In fact, the 4-litre or near 4-litre capacity straight 6 has been used dating back all the way to 1972 and the launch of the XA Falcon with Fords. Now, this large capacity single cam engine was used all the way up to 2002 with the AU and underwent many revisions such as cross-flow head, aluminium castings, and even by the last of the AU engines had VCT. So what makes the Barra so desirable here? Why aren't people the world over falling over themselves to install an intake from an AU Falcon with VCT? I think the prestige and lore around this engine can really be firmly placed at the feet of the XR6 Turbo. Within a short time of its release, people were treated to an 1163 horsepower dyno run at NIS Pro turbocharging. You can see that here from full boost. And with that, well, there was no stopping this train. And with that, all of a sudden, Ford fans had an ego challenge to the fabled LS engine that they'd wanted for so long. Now, with any major engine accomplishment, the inexperienced believe and see what happens there can happen for them. So all of a sudden, with the advent of social media, people were saying, hey, every Barra can make 1,000 horsepower, because that one does, right? Now, that's not to say the Intec engine from the AU Falcon isn't just as capable of the Barra with the same amount of money poured in it. Now, if you park the absolute stardom, unexplained stardom that is around the AU Falcon, purely based around memes, I think, and actually look at when the AU Falcon was launched, this car was a complete lemon and a turd for Ford Australia. It almost bankrupted their business. This was a new clean sheet build, and it was absolutely horrendous. It was not received well by the public, and as such, you know, it's only been in recent years with you know, social media and memes on it that AU Falcon is doing incredible things, mate. The only incredible thing an AU Falcon back then did was look ugly and blow basically every single brake light globe in Australia. All right, so you've just bought your BA Falcon. It's probably been around the clock a few times and it's done well over maybe 500,000 Ks. Time to turn up the boost, right? 1100 horsepower potential, yeah? Easy as that? Unfortunately, that's just not the case. You see, like everything in motorsports, how fast you want to go depends on how much money you want to spend. And the Barra, it's a behemoth, undeniable, but it's not without its drawbacks. Now, if you're lucky enough to pick up a fully fledged factory turbo Barra, well, guess what? You're in luck, but you're first snagging and hit at about 300 kilowatts, which is the valve springs. So simple enough, just get some valve springs from a reputable dealer, smack them in, and you're ready to make 1100 horsepower, right? Not so fast. Extra pressure on the cams mean you're gonna need probably an upgraded chain kit and the guides as well. Now you're ready to make some serious horsepower, but guess what? More horsepower means there's more chance of hitting the rev limiter. Hit the rev limiter one too many times, and guess what? Those oil pump gears that are just made from sintered metal are gonna shatter into a million pieces, ruining your engine. So you're gonna need some oil pump gears, and while you're at it, why not a billet backing plate? Okay. So now you're really ready to turn up the boost to make 1100 horsepower, right? Well, not so fast. All that increased cylinder pressure means you're gonna need a head stud kit and probably a decent gasket at the same time. Okay, so we've done all this. Surely now we're ready to make 1163 horsepower, right? Well, unfortunately not. The factory turbo rods aren't engineered to make a bazillion horsepower. They're rated to about 450, maybe 500 kilowatts, and that's probably about the safe limit that you'd want to actually push that engine to. Well, this brings us back to the point of the video. Is this the most overrated engine ever made? I mean, 1163 horsepower and you basically have to rebuild the entire engine and replace everything? I thought this was meant to be a world beater. Now, yes, I know. You there right now ready to type in the comments, oh, I've got a mate with an unopened, naturally aspirated FG engine and he's been making 700 horsepower at the rears for the last 10 years. Of course you have, no doubt about it. There's always going to be exceptions to the rule. However, all the other untold stories out there that you don't hear about are the ones where, oh yeah, we went to make 500 horsepower on our gas engine and we bent a rod. There's many more of those out there than there is of the people making 700 horsepower on unopened Barra engines, trust me. So, overrated? Well, absolutely not. Let's be honest here. How many other engines out there can you get and pour a little bit of money into and make a pretty reliable 500 kilowatts? Well, let's have a close look at what else is available out there and let's compare the Barra to those dollar for dollar. All right, so first we're gonna start with an LPG engine. It's the most affordable way to get into this with some decent rods, same as the rods in the turbo engine. So for $600, like the one that I bought, you get yourself one of these engines and you pretty much got the bottom end capable of making around about that 500 kilowatt limit there. So let's start with that. Now you might say, well, why wouldn't you start with a turbo engine? Well, a turbo engine is going to run you up to about $2,500 plus these days at least. And with the advent of E85 being fairly available throughout Australia, you know, it's not really a total requirement compared to the money that you can now spend on the gas engine to get it up to a limit of that 500. So if you were to buy a $2,500 turbo engine, factory turbo engine, you're still going to need to spend a significant amount of money to fix all those things like the valve springs and the chain and the oil pump gears and all this stuff. So you're probably better just getting a gas engine, investing some money in that. Now I've just bought like a 20-year-old engine, so put a full gasket set through it. There's not much cost involved there, and that'll just ensure when you do an engine conversion or whatever you're doing that you're not going to put it back in the rear mains leaking or the sumps leaking, something like that. So cheap maintenance there. We'll include the cost of what our 500 kilowatt Barra engine is with a gasket set as well. Now everyone who's watched Sloppy Mechanics knows that when you install a cam, you close your eyes and you just send it, and that means the cam bearings have to be fine because you don't know if they are or not. But Barra engines have probably done hundreds and hundreds of thousand kilometers. So really for probably under $250, you can change the main bearings and the rod bearings in these engines. It's really some cheap insurance. You don't have to do it, but hey, we want to make a budget 500 real kilowatts here of an engine. What's $250? It's not much. So don't be a tight ass, just change the bearings. If not, and something goes wrong, well, blame yourself, don't blame the tuner. Now, two other things that aren't completely necessary, but probably good in engine conversion stuff is something like this forward-facing plenum. This will really shorten the length of your intercooler piping. Also, just flow more CFM as well, so you can make more horsepower at less boost. All right, so the last piece of the puzzle here for your reliable 500 kilowatt Barra is this piece from Maculec Industries. The Barras are really renowned for rattling out their flywheel or flex plate bolts. So this piece actually locks them in place to stop that from happening, because if that happens, I guarantee you're gonna have a really bad day. But so the hardest part about doing all these builds, especially if you're new to the Barra scene, sort of like I was, is finding where to get all these parts from. I sourced everything you see here from Dominator Motorsports, and having a reputable dealer out there that sells all the parts in one place is a real advantageous to you. So get on Dominator Motorsports website and check that out. If you're in the US actually and you're looking to import a Barra and you're like, where do I start from? I want one of these engines, how do I get onto it? Drop a line to Dominator Motorsports. Michael and the team there will be able to sort you out on where over in the US you can get one of these engines, because those guys are sending engines and container full of them very often. So yeah, hit up Dominator Motorsports and find out where you can get your own Barra and your Barra Go Fast bits. All right, so that's it. An engine capable of making 500 real kilowatts all day, every day, huge torque monster, $600 engine. Around about $2,000 worth of Go Fast bits, just under that. So that is basically $2,500, and you've got a fairly reliable 500 real kilowatt capable engine. That's pretty impressive. Now I know everyone's expectations these days is to make 1,000 horsepower, and that's exactly what you need on the street, but most of those people haven't driven anything more powerful in their own mum's Barina. 500 real kilowatts or 670 horsepower at the rears is a hell of a lot of power. In a big heavy car like a Falcon, that's probably 10-second capable very easily. In a really light car like an old Cortina or a Capri, you're very capable of running a high 8 in that type of power range. So don't worry about the 1,000 horsepower. 500 real kilowatts, 670 horsepower is an absolute mountain of power and more than enough for you to get in trouble on the street. Now, if you do want all the dress up stuff like the plenum and the titanium bolts, you're probably going to run about another $1,000 or so, but they're not absolutely necessary. But they, when you're doing a project, you know, new bolts and all this kind of stuff really does make the project so much easier. Right, so 670 horsepower, 500 kilowatts at the wheels, that is, on like a dyno. That might be 750 to 800 at the actual flywheel on an engine dyno. That's $2,500 Australian to get that. Very great. Understand there's bolt-ons and that necessary, but let's just call that's $2,500 for the actual engine. Now let's have a look at what 2,500 Australian might get you, or what you'd have to spend in Australia to actually get that kind of horsepower. All right, so this GM Performance crate engine, LS architecture, supercharged, 650 horsepower at the crank, absolutely killer. And the price, $25,000. Yeah, $25,000. All right, so what does the old trusty small block Chev that's been around since the 50s net you? 400 horsepower? Oh, okay, that's not quite our 670 horsepower from a Barra, but must be more affordable than that. Let's see a price ticket on this one. $10,000. Okay, wow. Yeah, so you can see why people love these Barra engines. They are just so much horsepower per dollar that it's undeniable. Now, the other big engine here that's been known for engine conversions the world over is the LS, or the LS series of engines. An LS1 these days in Australia could run you up to near $4,000. Now, that's $4,000 Australian for 350 horsepower at the flywheel. You still then need to do your cams, your valve springs, all this kind of stuff, double row timing chain maybe. That $4,000 engine's gonna be, you know, $5,500 to $6,000 pretty easily to make, you know, to maybe make 500 horsepower plus, you know. So again, the Barra, realistically, dollar for dollar, the Barra wins again. Now, in my opinion, the only engine really dollar for dollar that's in the ballpark of this is probably the 1J, the 1JZ. The 1J is realistically an engine probably that's worth about $3,000 these days, so it's still hard to come by, but very, very capable in standard form. You're still going to probably have to spend some of the money on some of the stuff you spend on the Barra, but you know, the 1J is probably the only one that can really hold a candle to the Barra in terms of you know, dollar for horsepower in a standardish sort of form. Now, understand that the Barra is going to need, you know, a turbo to go along with it, injectors and all this kind of stuff, and that $25,000 crate engine from GM Performance probably comes with the injectors and the supercharger and everything, but the Barra's only cost us $2,500. That engine's $25,000. That means we have $22,500 to spend on performance bits. We can now afford a $22,500, an ECU, a turbo, an exhaust manifold, a transmission and a converter, probably a diff and everything too, and probably a car to go along with it. So you can see, absolute dollar for dollar, unbeatable. So 1J or Barra, you know, what's your actual choice here? Now, undeniable that the 1J or 2J even is a great engine, and it's probably a lot easier to install into a lot of wider range of cars because the Barra is a really tall engine. However, the big point for me and why I bought a Barra for my project car is one thing, and that is aftermarket and factory support. Now, start with a 1J or 2J is really expensive. You have to be able to find one to start with to start your project, whereas a Barra, well, you know, you can just jump on Facebook Marketplace or Gumtree and find one within about 5 minutes, and there's probably one within 15 minutes of you. They're everywhere, just like Bunnings Warehouse. They're all over Australia. You're not going to have an absolute problem finding a Barra at all. Now, another big factor for me for why I love the Barra engine, why I chose it for my project over a 1J, was the fact that parts are available everywhere. How easy it is for me to go down, say, to Burson Auto Parts and go, I need a throttle body, or I need an alternator, I need whatever it is. They've probably either got it on their shelf or they can have it within a day, or another store around the corner is going to have it. How many stores around Australia are going to have spare parts on a Saturday afternoon for a 1J? You know, all the stuff is very difficult to get through. There's only a couple of retailers in Australia really making parts for, or retailing parts for the 1J, which means it's really, really specific that if, you know, you happen to be out on a drag and drive event, like a drag challenge or something, and you're in a rural area somewhere, you've got a water pump failure on your Barra, guess what? Go to local Bursons or your auto parts stores, and they'll probably have a water pump there sitting on the shelf. You have a water pump failure in your 1J, what are you gonna do? You're stranded and you're done. And the other factor here is that I'm building this as a nice cruiser. A lot of people out there are as well. This is a 4-litre engine, which means a monster amount of bottom end torque, which means, you know, less turbo lag and stuff like that too. Now, they're not the most revvy of engines out there, but most of the stuff on the street is done in really low RPM range. And this is where these things absolutely shine because they're torque monsters. 1J, well, it's a 2.5-litre engine. So it just doesn't produce the low end RPM torque that this engine does. Now, if you look at area under the curb of a Barra making 670 horsepower versus say a 1J making 670 horsepower, I think you'll find the Barra makes significantly more power under the curb, and that can actually make for a much better driving experience on the street. So anyone out there who thinks this engine's overrated or just sick of seeing YouTubers use the Barra as an engine conversion of choice, well, you really need to understand the sheer economics of this. This is almost the last of the great affordable engines for engine conversions out there into cars. If you do have a low bonnet line, that is the only drawback really of the Barra here. They're a very tall engine, which will make putting it into cars with low bonnet lines really difficult and can be sometimes really ugly. So in conclusion, people may be absolutely sick of seeing these engines everywhere, but there's a reason for it. They're just like every hot rodder back in the day was putting a small block Chev into anything that had wheels. People are using the Barras for the same reason. They're cheap, plentiful, and they make monster torque and power. Now, the only drawback of a Barra compared to a small block Chev or even a 1J is the sound. They're not too easy on the ears. They're, yeah, it's not one of their greatest attributes, but if you can live with that, well, you'll have years of happy motoring. It's the engine I chose for my project car, so if you're out there and you like to see someone trying to shoehorn a Barra into a 1973 Mazda RX-4, well, click the subscribe button, follow the journey of us and building this project car, and yeah, we'll see how we get on. The car's gonna be fully engineered in a street legal car, so it's a perfect opportunity to see what you could do with your Barra conversion of your old car that you've got sitting out there doing nothing. Yeah, subscribe, thumbs up for the video, comment below what your thoughts are on it, and until next time, I'll see you then.